The Sorrow of Search from Time and the Gods by Lord and Senny. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lescal. It is told also of King Canazar how he bowed very low unto the gods of old. None bowed so low unto the gods of old as did King Canazar. One day the king, returning from the worship of the gods of old, and from bowing before them in the temple of the gods, commanded their prophets to appear before him, saying, I would know somewhat concerning the gods. Then came the prophets before King Canazar, burdened with many books, to whom the king said, It is not in books. Thereat the prophets departed, bearing away with them 1,000 methods well devised in books whereby men may gain wisdom of the gods. One alone remained, a master prophet, who had forgotten books, to whom the king said, The gods of old are mighty. And answered the master prophet, Very mighty are the gods of old. Then said the king, There are no gods but the gods of old. And answered the prophet, There are none other. And the two being alone within the palace, the king said, Tell me aught concerning gods or men, if aught of the truth be known. Then said the master prophet, Far and wide and straight lieth the road to knowing, and down it in the hidden dust go all wise people of the earth, but in the fields before they come to it, the very wise lie down or pluck the flowers. By the side of the road to knowing, O king, it is hard and hot, stand many temples, and in the doorway of every temple stand many priests, and they cry to travellers that weary of the road, crying to them, This is the end. And in the temples are the sound of music, and from each roof arises the savour of pleasant burning. And all that look at the cool temple, whichever temple they look at, or hear the hidden music, turn in to see whether it be indeed the end. And such as find that their temple is not indeed the end, set forth again upon the dusty road, stopping at each temple as they pass, for fear they miss the end, or striving onwards on the road, and see nothing in the dust, till they can walk no longer, and are taken worn and weary of their journey into some other temple by a kindly priest, who shall tell them that this also is the end. Neither on that road may a man gain any guiding from his fellows, for only one thing that they say is surely true, when they say, Friend, we can see nothing for the dust. And of the dust that hides the way, much has been there since ever that road began, and some is stirred up by the feet of all that travel upon it, and more arises from the temple doors. And, O king, it were better for thee, travelling upon that road, to rest when thou hearest one calling, This is the end, with the sounds of music behind him. And if in the dust and darkness thou pass by Lo and Mush and the pleasant temple of Kenash, or Shinath with his opal smile, or Sho with his eyes of agate, yet Shiloh and Minothetep, Gazo and Amirund, and Slig are still before thee, and the priests of their temples will no forget to call thee. And, O king, it is told that only one discerned the end and passed by 3,000 temples, and the priests of the last were like the priests of the first, and all said that their temple was at the end of the road, and the dark of the dust lay over them all, and all were very pleasant, and only the road was weary. And in some were many gods, and in a few only one. And in some the shrine was empty, and all had many priests, and in all the travellers were happy as they rested. And into some his fellow travellers tried to force him, and when he said, I will travel further, many said, This man lies, for the road ends here. And he that travelled to the end hath told that when the thunder was heard upon the road, there arose the sound of the voices of all the priests as far as he could hear, crying, Hearken to Shiloh, hear Mush, Lo, Gnash, the voice of Sho. Menathetep is angry, hear the word of Slig. And far away along the road one cried to the traveller that Shinath stirred in his sleep. O king, this is very doleful. It is told that the traveller came at last to the utter end, and there was a mighty gulf, and in the darkness at the bottom of the gulf one small god crept, no bigger than a hare, whose voice came crying in the cold, "I know not!" And beyond the gulf was naught, only the small god crying. And he that travelled to the end fled backwards for a great distance till he came to temples again, and entering one where a priest cried, "This is the end," lay down and rested on the couch. There Yush sat silent, carved with an emerald tongue and two great eyes of sapphire, and there many rested and were happy. And an old priest, coming from comforting a child, came over to that traveller who had seen the end, and said to him, "This is Yush, and this is the end of wisdom." And the traveller answered, "Yush is very peaceful, and this indeed the end." "O king, wouldst thou hear more?" And the king said, "I would hear all." And the master prophet answered, "There was also another prophet, and his name was Shan, who had such reverence for the gods of old that he became able to discern their forms by starlight as they strode, and seen by others among men. Each night did Shan discern the forms of the gods, and every day he taught concerning them, till men in Averon knew how the gods appeared all grey against the mountains, and how Rug was higher than Mount Skagadan, and how Skun was smaller, and how Sgul leaned forward as he strode, and how Trodath peered about him with small eyes. But one night, as Shan watched the gods of old by starlight, he faintly discerned some other gods that sat far up the slopes of the mountains in the stillness behind the gods of old. And the next day he hurled his robe away that he wore as Averon's prophet, and said to his people, "There be gods greater than the gods of old, three gods seen faintly on the hills by starlight looking on Averon." And Shan set out and travelled many days, and many people followed him. And every night he saw more clearly the shapes of the three new gods who sat silent when the gods of old were striding among men. On the higher slopes of the mountain, Shan stopped with all his people, and there they built a city and worshipped the gods, whom only Shan could see, seated above them on the mountain. And Shan taught how the gods were like grey streaks of light seen before dawn, and how the god on the right pointed upward toward the sky, and how the god on the left pointed downward toward the ground, but the god in the middle slept. And in the city Shan's followers built three temples. The one on the right was a temple for the young, and the one on the left a temple for the old, and the third was a temple with doors closed and barred, therein none ever entered. One night, as Shan watched before the three gods, sitting like pale light against the mountain, he saw on the mountain's summit two gods that spake together and pointed, mocking the gods of the hill, only he heard no sound. The next day Shan set out, and a few followed him to climb to the mountain's summit in the cold, to find the gods who were so great that they mocked at the silent three. And near the two gods they halted and built for themselves huts. Also they built a temple, wherein the two were carved by the hand of Shan, with their heads turned towards each other, with mockery on their face, and their fingers pointing, and beneath them were carved the three gods of the hill as actors making sport. None remembered now as Gul, Trodath, Skun, and Rug, the gods of old. For many years Shan and his few followers lived in their huts upon the mountain summit, worshipping gods that mocked, and every night Shan saw the two gods by starlight as they laughed to one another in the silence, and Shan grew old. One night, as his eyes were turned towards the two, he saw across the mountains in the distance a great god sitting in the plain and looming enormous to the sky, who looked with angry eyes towards the two as they sat and mocked. Then said Shan to his people, the few that had followed him thither, "Alas, that we may not rest, but beyond us in the plain sitteth the one true God, and is wroth with mocking. Let us therefore leave these two that sit and mock, and let us find the truth in the worship of that greater God, who even though he killed